So, hi, my name is Keith Gelhorn, and I own ADDvocacy. What we do is we coach neurodivergent youth and adults who live with ADHD, learning disabilities, autism, anxiety, and any co-occurring mental health challenge that impacts executive functioning. Up until about a week ago, our clientele were 18 plus. So we high school and plus. We primary focus on kids in grade 12. We have a post-secondary transition program, college, university, right through PhD students. We also have a career transition program or coaching for professionals as well as entrepreneurs. The reason I say it changed about a week ago is we've recently done a little handshake with Beyond ADHD. So they provide ADHD diagnosis for kids 6 and up. For about $300, give or take, instead of spending $3,500, which you typically pay for a psych ed assessment. So we've got a collaboration going with them. I also have another collaboration going with the Adult ADHD Center, which is based out of British Columbia. They focus on diagnosis 18 and up. They actually have nurse practitioners stationed right across Canada. That process is about 4 to 8 weeks or so for the turnaround. Beyond ADHD, they have instantaneous. So two big announcements, I suppose. Currently, I'm going to introduce Leanne. She's from Sober City, Halifax, and I'll just let you take over. There's no point in me spieling on about your...
Sure. Yeah. So hello, Leanne Richardson here. I am the founder of Sober City, which is based out of here in Halifax. Well, I'm in Dartmouth, and I started Sober City January 2020. But to back up, as Keith did say a little bit earlier, how he did coach me when I went back to school. That is true. And he helped me a lot in a lot of ways. And basically my journey to get to where I'm at now is incredibly colorful, but I can summarize it. I believe I can. So bear with me here. I was the age of 30 when I quit drinking alcohol, and also at the same time when I was diagnosed with ADHD, and when I decided to go back to school and get my life together. And I did that because I was in active addiction with mostly alcoholism, some drug use for basically all of my 20s. It started back in my teen years. And when I'm trying to connect how ADHD might have come into play with my addiction, because I know there's a lot of connections. When I look back and I try to find connections with how it could have presented, and I see it in so many ways. And like I said, I was diagnosed when I was 30, but when I was a child, always on my report cards was that Leanne talked too much, or that I was, I would hyper focus on some things, but then miss the bigger picture type stuff. Or when I was cleaning my room as a child, I would be found in the corner, coloring, where my whole room would be an absolute mess, but I would feel completely at home. Little ways like that. And into my teen years, my impulsivity started to get more and more intense. And then that's when alcohol use would come into play. And basically all through my 20s is when my alcoholism really, really ramped up. It went from risky behavior, risky drinking, binge drinking, into a full-blown alcohol use disorder, where, I burned so many bridges, lost a lot of friends, lost respect for myself. I was suicidal for a little while there. I was homeless a few times. I really felt like at the end of my 20s that I didn't know what my future held, but I knew that I had more potential, but I just didn't know what to do. I was completely stuck in my life. And of course, as I don't know, a lot of people might know this, if they know addiction, then they would know that you never really think it's the alcohol or your drug of choice that's causing all the trouble in your life. You feel like you need to fix yourself first, and then maybe later on you might think about quitting drinking. But a lot of people don't realize, really should quit the substance first, and then the things will follow. So I thankfully figured that out. I got sober at 30. March 2nd, 2014 is my sobriety date. 6 months later, I went back to school. So I would have met Keith when I was around 6 months sober. And at that point in my life, like I said, I was stuck. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was dirt poor. I ended up finding basically like an employment agency here. They helped me get a grant to go back to school, basically. And then through the government, they helped me to get funding to be diagnosed with ADHD, inattentive type ADHD. And then they funded for me to have a coach, which was Keith. And he helped me in my first year of college, just with organization and helping me to understand how my brain worked. Because up until that age, up until I was 30, when I got diagnosed, I had no idea. I legitimately thought that I broke my brain with alcohol. I didn't think it would be possible for me to think, because all my thoughts were always jumbled up. Nothing made sense. I couldn't have clear thoughts, but realizing now when I look back, a lot of that had to do with the active alcohol use. And then in recovery, it takes a while for your brain to sort of rewire itself. But I went through the recovery, went through school. I ended up graduating with honors. And I know that a lot of that had to do with the coaching that I received from Keith, literally helping me how to write notes, how to organize my thoughts, and how to step back and look at my coursework, say, for instance. But so I graduated from that. I now have a career that I absolutely love. And because I'm 8.5, almost 9 years sober now, I talk about it on YouTube. I started my YouTube channel long before I started Sober City, but I felt like Halifax needed something to help people out who were newly sober or sober curious. People needed to know where to go, what places had non-alcoholic beer, for instance, or how do you meet other sober friends, so I created Sober City in that one goal of connecting people in recovery and connecting people to show people that sobriety isn't boring and that Halifax has a lot to offer that doesn't involve drinking on a patio like everyone associates with Halifax. So it's been almost 3 years now with Sober City, and I still do weekly meetups. We do Zoom meetups, and I've made a lot of connections with people in different stages of sobriety, different stages of substance use. And I've learned so much in the past almost 3 years by running Sober City, and it's continuing to grow. And I did some peer support training as well, so I'm adding that to it. But by day, I am in engineering. So that is my focus. But Sober City stuff and YouTube is what I do in the evenings. So that's pretty much me all wrapped up. As you can see, it is colorful. My colorful past is lengthy, but I think I summarized it best I possibly could. But yes, thank you for having me on. And I am excited for questions.
Yeah. So how did you swing from realizing specifically it was just kind of casual drinking and hanging out with friends? Because I remember you were like a rock star and a half. You probably still are, I'm guessing. But yeah, you had the whole scene going for you. How did you, what was your aha moment? I remember with me, drinking was never an issue. I don't drink at all, but my aha moment was, somebody said to me once, because I used to blame everybody else for everything that was going on around me. And this foreman that I used to be a plumber, and this foreman said, Keith, if you look around and everybody's an asshole, or you think everybody's an asshole, the biggest asshole is going to be staring you right back in the face. And at the time I wanted to take his head off. But I went home and I stared in the mirror and I was just thinking about it. I was like, I am an asshole. There's no question in my mind. I hate my life. I hate my job. I hate everything that's going on and everything. And it was the turning point, the start of the turning point. I didn't do anything immediately, but a couple months later is when I got my diagnosis, went and do something. What was your kind of aha moment, or have you had multiple of them?
Yeah. I did have one big one. I'm lucky enough to say I had one big rock bottom night, basically, where police were called. It was, I wanted to end my life that night and I almost succeeded. But thankfully, my roommate came to my rescue, and a friend of mine, and had no plans of quitting drinking, getting back home from the hospital that night. No plans at all. But the next morning, I could feel literally like the air was different. Like there was something different. It was as if my world had, like the atoms in my world were different. Something changed basically overnight. It felt like, and I was like, I'm quitting drinking. I need to. And then that's when it all flooded into of all the different things that I have really messed up in my life. But I think what helped with that switch was all the little things of realizing that, oh no, I'm not doing actions that good people do. I don't want to ever say that I was a bad person, but I did a lot of really shitty things and a lot of things that were embarrassing and scary. And I could have died many times. So I think that all just came that night where I was like, whoa, like, okay, I'm going to die if I don't stop this. And then I stop. And then of course, that's when the really hard work kicks in. When you finally put the drink down, then you're like, okay, now you do all the therapy and group therapy and really working on yourself. So yeah, I was lucky enough to have one big event that really did it.
Just did it for you. Okay. And navigating through, there's lots of different programs you can do. Can you talk about the programs that you did do and what you found effective and what didn't? Because I know I'm sure it wasn't just like, I quit drinking and I'm never a problem anymore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I reached out to Nova Scotia Mental Health and Addiction Services. So they hooked me up with a one-on-one social worker. I can't remember how many, like 10 free sessions or something like that really got me started with, looking out for relapse triggers and the core work like that. But basically that next morning, March 2nd, 2014, when I woke up and the air felt different, I was like, I got to quit drinking. What do I do? The first thing I thought of, because movies tell you, is AA. I was like, okay, I'll try that. So I did AA for a year, had a sponsor for a few months, and I found that very helpful. But I stopped going after a while for lots of different reasons, mostly logistical reasons, going back to school and whatnot. And I ended up switching to more one-on-one therapy, which helped a lot. And I did a few through addictions, mental health services as well. I did like a depression workshop, a cognitive behavioral therapy workshop. So more group support in that way. And then once I created Sober City, I do the weekly online meetups, which is basically an hour meeting of peer support. So then that ended up taking over for me. But yeah, I found mostly for me, one-on-one works best in the beginning because I felt like I had a lot going on up here, so that worked best for me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I did. I started off with 10 sessions in Kelowna. Here I found, I'm surprised you got 10. I mean, in mental health, you get 3. So 10's good. 10, wow. And 10 was the limit in Kelowna as well. But on session 9, they're like, oh, you're doing pretty good, right? I'm sure. I don't know if they try to do the same with you. They do for all of us, right? Yeah. But anyways, I was like, I'm not leaving. I said, I don't care what you do. I'm staying. And I said, how do I stay? And they said, oh, you got to be suicidal. I'm like, great. Give me the phone. Comes to the question. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to drive a car off the bridge on the way home. Just like, I don't care what I got to say. That I call it strategic kiss assing. It's my old oppositional defiant side, but I do it in a much nicer way than I used to. And then I was able to stay, and I stayed for 2.5 years. I went every same day, same time, every week for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And did every type of therapy known to man, grief so cool. Therapy, counseling, whatever. So along the lines, like everybody knows about AA. What other kinds of supports are there out there for?
Yeah. The next biggest one would be Smart Recovery. And that is, I don't know much about it. I just know that a lot of people prefer it that way, or prefer that program. And there's also Life Ring. There is moderation management as well, which moderation and alcohol use disorder for most people do not mix. So, but that is something that exists out there for the few people who it would work for. And then there's online, there's the Luckiest Club that you can find online. There's lots of different online groups, mostly found in the United States, but they're open. They do like Zoom sessions as well. And if you're here in Halifax, then there's Sober City. as well.
Okay.
But a lot of online resources nowadays.
There's lots there, right?
Mm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So over the years, how have you been able to stay sober and not, I mean, can you tell, actually, I should say, I'm going to preface that. How, like, yeah, how, not stay sober, but I mean, you would have had to change your whole friendship group, I'm sure. I remember actually we were coaching around that very thing, that you like going out and doing your thing.
Yeah.
And then I remember that it was like this big, like, what do I do? Right? What do I do with my time? So how did you make that shift just in a lifestyle?
That's right. I forgot we talked about that too, because that would have been important in you
Yeah, no,
coaching
it's
me.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I was going to metal shows and punk shows multiple times a week, and very into that scene for the last like 2 years of my drinking career. So that was, yeah, it was a big thing of like, okay, I can't go to the seedy underbelly of the punk community in Halifax. I can't do that anymore, even though I love all the people and I miss them. I was like, I can't put myself in that situation. So what do I do? Thankfully, like I said, I went back to school when I was 6 months sober, and that took 2 years of my life where I had to really concentrate. That helped a lot. For people who don't go back to school, a hobby helps a lot. Something to take big amounts of your time is what I tell people. But yeah, for me, it was school that helped immensely. And just really paying attention to how I felt when I was around certain people, even if they were lifelong friends who I've known, since I was a teenager. If I was around them and I could feel judgment, or I could feel awkward in any kind of way around alcohol, or if I could see that they weren't respecting me and putting, a bunch of beer in the table right in front of me, type thing, and not thinking, I would take note. I would have conversations with friends and say, just so you know, like I can smell the alcohol. So after 2 hours at the bar having lunch with you, I'm going to have to leave early because it gets a little, I'd have those conversations with people. Most people would be completely respectful and it would be fine. But I had a lot of those types conversations with people, and basically keeping my distance. I didn't go to a punk show for a year after I got sober, and I was terrified before I went to that show, but it was awesome. It was awesome. And I just drank Pepsi all night. And I mean, people don't friggin' notice. People don't care.
They don't care.
They don't. Right. But the people who did notice, then they didn't care. They're like, so what? You're here. Like, it's great. I haven't seen you in forever. Yeah. Filling my time with other things and really focusing on my future is what friggin' did it.
Yeah. So one of the things about like going out to a restaurant and just getting a Coke, right? I do it all the freaking time. And I feel like almost guilty about it. Like, well, I'm not getting the booze thing, right? Or I have to say, or I have to preface it, I'm the designated driver, which is technically true. Like, you can't afford to not have a driver's license in Halifax, right? Yeah. But the other part about it is it just doesn't agree with me, right? It's just not my jam. Yeah. But what are some of the challenges that you've found? Like, I mean, people in your group and stuff have talked about with, especially in a drinking town like Halifax. I mean, where you walk out of one pub right into the next one. That's the jam here. What are some of the challenges you found with some of your members?
There's a lot. And I think there's a lot that most people don't realize. And so I'm happy to educate. And I would say the main one being is that, well, I'll preface this with, I ended up looking at, it took me many months, but I reviewed every menu of every bar and restaurant in HRM on their online menus and whatnot. I gathered all that data. Remember I said engineer earlier, I'm a data analyst. So I gathered all that information. It's on my website as the bar and restaurant guide. So I saw who has non-alcoholic beer, who carries mocktails, all that kind of stuff. And in doing that exercise, I realized that the vast majority, it's changing over the past year. It's awesome. It's changing for the better, but for the vast majority of establishments, they don't list any non-alcoholic drinks on the menu. Quote unquote, normal people would say, well, so what? Just ask your server. Okay. But think about it. Imagine you are a month sober and this is your first time going out. No one really knows you're sober. You want to keep it to yourself. You don't want the whole friggin' table to know, or whatever the case may be. Or you might be someone who just doesn't really drink, or maybe you're pregnant, or whatever the reason is. And then when the server comes over, you have to be like, hey, so where are your non-alcoholic drinks? You just announced to the whole table that you're not drinking. There comes some stigma, there comes some judgment, or maybe not, but you don't know. It's a terrifying situation for a lot of people. So then the server has to, try to remember off the top of their head and then list off all the things. So, I mean, it's just uncomfortable for so many people when they can just list it on the menu. That's the biggest one. And the next biggest one that I've heard from other people is just being next to alcohol at the table, like within nose distance of smelling it and seeing people drink. And then, of course, a few hours in, you see the change in your friends at the table. Then that can, of course, be a little much. And then we'd have to duck out a little bit early. But honestly, man, it's the lack of options on the menu. Or the other last thing is when we say, okay, well, do you have any mocktails? Like fun cocktail like things, but without the alcohol. Oh, well, the bartender can make you whatever you want. Like, okay, but can you just show me like what they're got through? Well, do you want fruity or do you want savory? I'm like, what? Really? Like, do you do this for food? You know what I mean? So, like, if they were to list it out, they would make so much more money, and it would take the burden off the customer. Like, anyway, so those are the main ones that we find when it comes to going out in establishments that people don't really realize.
Yeah, on the booze side of things, my buddies all like craft beer. I hate beer. I don't even know why people touch this stuff. It's disgusting, right? But we'll go out to like any of the brew houses, and they've got one obscure, disgusting drink that they'll put on the menu, and it will be non-alcoholic, but they'll still charge you $10 for it. It's like some disgusting concoction, right, of what they think is good. I don't know. I can't wrap my head around it. For me, it's twofold. One, I do have an addictive personality, so I was like, I just quit smoking for my second time, like 500 days smoke free now. But
oh, wow, awesome.
It started back when I hired a coach who loved smoking, and I was like, give me one of those, and then another one. We smoked a pack on the way to the valley. That was it. But anyways, got out of that. But we do have a question. Sometimes my partner's mom will start almost guilting me into drinking so she doesn't feel shitty about it or shitty about herself. People have hinted at her drinking too much. It's not my place to speculate whether she has a drinking problem. Any suggestions for how I can respond to someone who starts judging their own drinking as a way of getting me to join them so they feel less guilty about their own behavior?
First of all, that is really good insight. A lot of people don't equate that. Is when someone's guilting them in, it's often because it's a reflection on them. They don't want to appear like the one that's drinking because they want someone to join in. That is classic. A lot of the Sober City community members have talked about this exact thing in the meetups. And so that's really good insight. And how would you, any suggestions for how I can respond to someone who starts judging? Yeah, for real, man. Stay true to yourself, obviously, in that way. But I mean, it would depend on the relationship that you would have with that person. But I would, if there was any way to have any kind of one-on-one, be like, I prefer not to drink today, or whatever the case may be. Can you maybe please not mention that again? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I don't want to. So I would try to do more of a one-on-one casual thing, not like, because I find a lot of times it's easy to get someone to get defensive quickly, especially when they're already appearing to be a little defensive anyway by wanting you to join in. I've encountered that too, and it's uncomfortable, but I would set the boundary before they even get more alcohol in their system. I would set the boundary before and be like, just so you know, reminder, like, I'm not going to, but you're fine. Do what you feel you need to do, but no judgments here. But I just I'm just not going to. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't try to get me to come along on your adventure. No, thank you. Yeah, that's super common though.
I don't know if you can see the chat too, but it says, is me not saying anything about whether she should or shouldn't right thing. I think there isn't anything that I can say that's right. I literally don't know what to say and don't want to engage.
Exactly. No, good read. There really isn't. I mean, I could see maybe if, and this is mother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Or partner's mom. Yes. So no, there's really wouldn't be. I would think, if it was a mother-daughter relationship, even then, maybe not. But no, I really don't think that there would be really much you could say other than your partner talking to the mom in that kind of way, to say, hey, so I've been noticing, like, how's your relationship with alcohol? It seems like it might be a little on edge or something there. Is there anything you want to talk about or anything like that? I remember when I was in that situation, yeah, it was weird for me to be around sober people when I just wanted to party. And by party, I could mean even just having drinks with dinner at 6 o'clock with my family. It would be because it would be a mirror to me of like, oh, I'm drinking and they're not. They must think that I'm off the rails or whatever. So then I would get all in my head about that. And there's really nothing that anyone could have said to me unless they were someone very close to me. And even then, it wouldn't have made a difference really, but it would have planted a seed.
So I got a question. I've got a long-standing friend of mine who does a lot of addiction issues, especially around alcoholism in the family. Care about him a lot. Good friend of mine. And, he's been through recovery. He's done the meetings. And then, we'll get together at times and be like, well, it's okay if we have a drink now, right? And I feel like super uncomfortable, right? Like I know the family, I know the history. I'm just like, what the hell? But I can't control the guy's life, but either, right? So I'm trying to be supportive, but also just kind of stuck. And I'm sure this happens a lot. So what's your thoughts on that selective sobriety type thing? So it's like, well, I'm with these people, I'm sober, but I'm with my boys, I can do whatever the heck I want. Like I don't, yeah. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, a lot. And it's so friggin' tricky. And it's so unfortunate because, I mean, if you had asked me this in my first year of recovery, I would be like, well, they're in trouble. They're doomed. This is terrible. But now that I've had years of talking to people and learning about all of this, well, first of all, your particular case with your friend, that actually does sound like, he has more of an issue than, risky drinking or binge drinking.
No,
but I know. Yeah. Okay. Because I know for some people who aren't to that level, they can, only on special occasions. And I've seen it work for some people, but I know others who have alcohol use disorder, or who are almost to that stage. I mean, it just sounds like a justification or a rationalization, and it makes sense for a lot of people because they still glamorize drinking and still remember the good times. And it's really easy to forget how much alcohol can completely destroy your life as to why the person would quit to begin with. And there's still for a lot of people who, some people would say they're white knuckling it by just not drinking, but not doing a lot of internal work. So they still glamorize alcohol. They still see a lot of magic around it. So they still think like, oh, maybe someday I'm going to get to drink like a normal person and I get to experience that again. So then they would look for reasons like, okay, well, this is, I'm going to Vegas, or where's my birthday, or whatever it is. And
the little sneakaways.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, well, first, that's sort of unfair to not put that on a friend, but sort of like almost asking for your validation to like, well, what do you think? Like that's puts you in an uncomfortable position. Cause what are you supposed to say in that? Like, are you serious? But yeah. And now when I hear that, I just instantly feel like, oh, like I want to hug that person because it feels like they still, you know, haven't come to peace yet with how amazing life is without that controlling every friggin' aspect of your life.
Yeah. So I know a lot of it's intertwined, and this is part of the reason I want to have you on. A lot of it is intertwined with like mental health or executive function challenges. So it's just the impulsivity thing, right? I always think about, when I think about impulsivity and executive functioning, or just any emotion in general coming out, I think of like neurotypical people of having like this tightly woven neural network in their brain that stops them from doing anything stupid. But people like us or me, I got like Swiss cheese. So if I'm lucky, I hit the cheese. If not, any raw emotion, thought, impulsivity comes rocketing out, and I, like, quote unquote, can't help what I'm doing or saying, right? Or putting myself into situations that aren't serving me in any situation. I always think about it with like people in the prison population. I mean, the only reason I'm not in jail because there's no cell cameras back in the day when I was road raging it up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think about just any comments on that and the comorbidity? I hate that word, co-occurring challenges with mental health, trauma, the whole bit.
Oh man, the trauma word, you're right. Like, and then adding in a brain that isn't typical. Yeah, it makes things a lot harder for what I found in my own life. And then I found in other people too, because the impulsivity and coping with boredom and all that kind of stuff doesn't just go away. Like, it's still there, except we no longer have that drug to numb or that drug to feel like we're us again, you know, because that's why I used to drink, is so that I could feel like I was myself, and I would feel like I was finally free and finally able to socialize and be funny and be cool and all this stuff. But so then you'd remove alcohol and it's like, well, who the hell am I? So then there's identity issues. Then there's some past traumas that could come up for a lot of people. And then there is, making sense of your own thoughts, that ADHD would come into play there, where I don't know if this is true for most people, but I know for me, when my ADHD would show up in the way of, I would have 700 thoughts and none of them connected. And it only made me feel overwhelmed and panicked and like I was doomed forever. Even though I was on the right path and going to therapy and in recovery and all that stuff, it was still incredibly overwhelming. So yeah, I feel like, I mean, I don't know what it would be like to have a neurotypical brain and go through recovery, but I've seen it in some people and they just seem to, I don't know, maybe they're just good at talking, but I feel like I am so much more scatterbrained than a lot of those people. And it's not that one person has it easier than the other. Some people would argue that my recovery was easier than theirs or whatever. But it all depends on everything in your body and in your whole past and everything, that there's really is no comparison. But I know that it makes things a lot more difficult, and with medication as well. Once you add that in to play, when some medications can be more addictive than others, say, and depending on the person, throwing that into the mix too can make things even more confusing and complicated. I don't have any personal experience with medication, so I don't know. I can't speak on that, but yeah, oh my goodness. And the coping with boredom part, that's one thing that I noticed, and I wasn't sure. It was maybe a year ago. So I was like 7 years sober, and I don't have a boring life. I have a pretty colorful life, I would say now. It's just healthy. But I was starting to notice that I was like trying to get into things that made me feel alive, like no adrenaline junkie stuff, but like listening to like, true crime podcasts or like watching really disturbing movies, and I was starting to wonder, why am I doing that? But I felt like, and it was dopamine rushes. And I was like, what is happening? And then I realized that, and I brought that up to my group. I was like, hey, does anyone else feel this way? Because, you know, before it would be, I would go out and party and get absolutely wasted and make a fool of myself. And that would make me feel fulfilled. But now I didn't have anything to be extreme about. So horror movies and like true crime made me feel extreme. It made me feel sick sometimes because of the gore and stuff. And I was like, but it was the dopamine that was doing. It's so interesting. I'm still learning. Yeah,
that's valid. The other thing I wanted to ask, I guess along the lines of the quote unquote dope hit as a play on words, the other individuals like, well, I don't drink, but now I'm, chronic weed smoker, whatever, drug user instead, and think, oh, there's nothing. That's not I quit drinking, so that's fine. Now I'm going to do this one, or smoking, or whatever else your addiction is. Because the long and the short is probably regardless of whatever your poison is, it's all like an addictive thing that's bad for you, right? So, or food or anything, right? I got my thing's not drinking, but the reason I don't drink is my parents do. They drink homebrew. My dad at all point in time has over 400 bottles of homebrew, and he in his possession, and they drink 2 a night. And he's like, oh, it's normal. It's like juice. And I'm like, you guys are pickled, right? There's nothing. And it's been going on for my whole life. And I just watched them go from really nice. And I'm not saying anything bad about them. I like my parents, but
I understand
to that, to just like incoherent after 2 bottles, and they justify being a homebrew. No big deal, right?
Oh dear.
It's any thoughts on that, or replacing it, a substance replacement or anything? Because I know it happens a lot.
It does, yeah. And I would always say, well, does the replacement, like, sure, at first it might be fine. Let's just use weed for an example.
Sure.
Say someone quit drinking, and then they quit drinking because they had alcohol use disorder, not to the point where, quitting cold turkey would kill them. No, I'm not talking about to that level, because I know for a lot of those people, marijuana can help them immensely when it comes to detoxing. But for just like someone like me, say, I was pretty bad and then I quit. So yeah, if I were to switch to marijuana because it helps with sleep, there's so many great benefits.
Yeah, so many benefits, yeah.
Right. So I always tell people, I'm like, okay, well, I mean, just pay attention. That's all. It might be great for the first few months, but just be aware, be self-aware, start to notice if it's starting to creep in and it's starting to, replace other activities. Same as alcohol. That's what I would tell people, like, just pay attention to how it's starting to, if it even does start to affect the way you think or how you feel or your life. If people that you trust are starting to tell you things about yourself or maybe about your use, then that would warrant looking at it. So I would always say, of course, well, not anything is better than alcohol. Obviously, if they switch to Coke or something, then that's not good. But, there's or whatever it is, like, just pay attention. Does it negatively affect your life? Okay, well, explore your relationship further with that second substance. But that's with substances. Then there's food, there's shopping. There could be exercise addiction or video game addiction. I know that, sure, it's all addiction, but in a lot of ways, they have a lot of similarities in how it makes you feel inside. Yeah. And that's, again, where the self-awareness would come into play. And that's what I tell people all the time, is just pay attention to what it does in your life and how it makes you feel, and just watch it.
So I like you called out the dopamine addiction, because that's what I will do when I start getting down those zones, right? Just chasing I get my own highs. I have highs and lows, right? So I'm either extreme, like happy, good mood, kicking ass, which I am now. A month ago, I couldn't even get out of bed, right? I was just so depressed, couldn't even function. I do live on a little bit of a polar extreme personally. Not bipolar, or not diagnosed anyways, but I do have the highs and lows for sure. And when I get on the ripper, you were just mentioning it before we got on here, hadn't been on in a month, right? Well, I've been trying to do these for like 10 years. And then it just dawned on me yesterday. I was like, man, I went from 5 of these to 19, and they keep going. I've got people keep wanting to come on. I was like, I just created a half year worth of content in 3 weeks, right? Like, you can't go wrong with that, right? So
exactly. I did the exact same thing with my YouTube channel. I put the call out, and I had so many interviews planned. I still have some I need to edit. And like I said before we started, once you feel that motivation, friggin' run with it. Because when are you going to get that again?
Exactly.
I've learned that about myself so far. And you see, even me last week, I was so depressed. I felt like I couldn't breathe some days. Yeah. So, but this week I'm getting back into it, and you would never be able to tell.
This will probably help, but as I say, this will probably help, because once you do one, because I'm always freaked out of doing it. I had to do one during COVID, and I literally hired somebody for $1,000 to sit on the other side of the computer while I delivered a 3-hour workshop. And she's like, "Do you want me to do anything else?" I'm like, "No, not really. Just sit over there. I don't even care." Right. Because I don't want to talk to a blank screen. And this is interactive. But yeah, I couldn't get out of my own way to do the damn thing, but I got her done. Right.
I hear you. And that's a huge accomplishment. So seriously, good for you. I know what that's like.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
All right. So if someone chooses to drink in your company, does it mean anything? I typically am the responsible friend. I like to have a drink here and there, but I'm not the friend people would experiment with drugs with. I guess the question is it worth examining who you drink with and why?
Good question.
Yeah, lots of good questions.
It's funny. I've had a question similar to that over the years by like really great friends who want to be sure that they're not like being a dick in some sort of way. So it's awesome. I love these questions. And so if someone chooses to drink in my company, doesn't mean anything. For me personally, no, because I keep in mind that like people are going to do what they want to do. And for the vast majority, like 98% of the time, people aren't thinking that it could bother me. And if they do, then they'll ask and then it would be fine. But is it worth examining who you drink with and why? Yes. I mean, I think everything would be, if there's a question in there, examine it, no matter what situation you're in. It's all around being self-aware, I would say. But like I was saying earlier, like I would say to a sober person, how does it make you feel to be around that person? Do you feel like they respect your boundaries and that kind of stuff? And when it comes to the friend who still does drink occasionally, because my best friend still drinks occasionally, and but he's respectful and will, not drink too close to me in proximity. But I already feel comfortable with this person and I already trust them completely. So I don't need to question that, but it's still always in the back of my head with anybody who drinks alcohol around me, where I'm like, okay, I'll just pay attention. If they start to get rowdy and like talk to me this close, then I'm like, okay, maybe they're just ignorant, or maybe they just don't respect me. So I always question it and I'm always paying attention. But I mean, overall, I personally don't care much anymore. Because I'm so far into it, doesn't trigger me anymore,
Right.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us more about the meetup stuff that you do? I did post all your social media links. But where can people find you on YouTube and all that jazz? Cool.
Yes. So on YouTube, I generally do post every week, except I did take the last month off. Mental health, am I right?
Yeah.
Whatever, man. I couldn't be creative anymore. But anyway, I'm going to get back into it because this helped a lot. To talk into a camera again with all the lights. So I'm like, okay, I think I'll get back into YouTube again. But I do a lot of basically like talking about how to stay sober or how to avoid relapse. I've done some interviews with people who are newly sober and that kind of stuff. So my YouTube channel is called Addicted to Happy. I can put the link in the chat here, but that's where the public, I guess, would be able to get a lot of my content the quickest and the newest, because Sober City, I would just randomly post, if I hear that a restaurant now carries a certain type of non-alcoholic beer, say I'll post on that. So the Sober City social media, that's more geared towards Halifax and sharing resources in that way. Whereas my YouTube channel is just more general alcohol recovery and mental health and stuff like that. So yeah, Sober City Halifax across all the different major social networks, and Addicted to Happy on YouTube is where you will find me.
So thanks so much for coming on. It would be interesting if you ever wanted to do a flipped one. It'd be interesting if your group is ever interested in chatting about ADHD. I'd do a little research on that and help you guys out, because I just did my thing. It's 5 to 10%, or it's 5 to 10 times more common among people with ADHD to be alcoholics, and it's about 25% abuse booze. I would wager to say that's low.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, really low.
Totally.
So on on that note, yeah, if you're ever up for that chat, I'm going to keep these things going. So maybe we could motivate each other at some point.
I think so. Yeah. Yes, please. That
would
be great. I'll have you on my YouTube channel too. And yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it'd be cool to have that chat. Thanks so much for coming on. And thank you for everybody for joining and all your questions.